Hello my dear friends, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can use external libraries in Odoo using OOL. Actually, I received one request before and I want to check how it works. The first JavaScript library that I'm going to show you is the International Telephone Input. You can use this in getting correct international telephone numbers which display the flags and dial codes of each country. Every country selected will give you the sample format that you can use. Using this validate button, we are able to identify if the phone number is valid or not. These are only some functionalities that you can use, but there are other options by reading the documentation. The next one is more challenging, wherein we are going to save the files into the database using Filepond Javascript library. If we upload some files, it will show you an image preview, a percentage, and indicates if it was uploaded successfully or not. To verify if it was successfully saved, let's open the attachment module, and yes, it's showing on the list, which is the same with the ones we uploaded. There's also an option to delete this file. Let's try to delete and verify under attachment model. Reload the page. Okay, it was successfully deleted. For this tutorial, I use default IR attachment model, but the method will work to any models that has binary field type. Alright, before we start, let's play the music. To speed up this tutorial, I already prepared the client action, menu item, component, and the template so that we can focus more in implementing external libraries using OOL. If we check in the browser, you can see that the client action and the component are working fine with simple text OOL using external libraries. Alright, let's start doing the first task, which is to use International Telephone Input JavaScript library. Let's open the link on GitHub. I will include the link on the description, or you can just search it in Google and you will arrive in the same link. The good thing here is that it provides a nice documentation on how to use it with demos and examples. Why don't we check the demo and let's have a quick look on how it works. As you can see, it will provide a list of countries with flags and dial codes. Once selected, it will also give you the correct format which you can use for validation. There are several options here like validation, user's country, national mode, etc. But in this tutorial, we will focus only in validating phone numbers. Let's click Getting Started. We have three options here on how we can use this library, either by using CDN, bundler, or directly downloading the file and save it inside our module. We will be covering both CDN and manually downloading the file. Using Webpack, I'm not sure yet since Odoo has its own bundler system. Let me know in comment section if someone already tried it. Now that we know the files needed, but how we can add it and use it in Odoo. Let's go back to our project, and the way we add external libraries in Odoo is using two methods, which is load.js and load.css from web core assets. But don't be confused with external Python packages since that's a different topic. We are only interested in JS and CSS libraries. We then need to import two lifecycle methods in OOL. On will start, which is the best part to load these files, and on mounted to make sure that the component has been rendered before initializing the object. This is the same idea when loading JavaScript file. The script must be added at the end of the body to make sure that the element exists first before selecting. Let's add onWillStart method with arrow function. Let's use first the load.js function which accepts a link of the file as a parameter. Let's go back and copy the CDN link. To know if the file was successfully loaded, first let's activate debug mode, then inspect Network tab, and make sure to select JS files. Reload the page, and yes, we can see it on the list. Let's do the same thing to load CSS function. Copy the CDN link and paste. Go back to the browser. In this case, let's select CSS and reload the page. It's also showing on the list, which means we can now start using this library. Let's check how we can use it. So in this example, it uses query selector method, but in all, we need to do it using useref method. Let's go back to our project and import useref from all and add a new class field. This phone is equal to useref phone. We then need to use this ref in the template. Let me quickly create the layout. So as you can see, I added a tref phone, which is the same as query selector method if you use vanilla JavaScript. Let's now initialize intel input and select this input field. Add the unmounted lifecycle method using arrow function. To check if intel input object is loaded on this lifecycle, let's try to console log it. We got an error. Intel input is not defined. You're probably wondering why. It's because at this moment, the JS file wasn't successfully loaded yet. We call this function under onWillStart, but when the component has been mounted, it's not yet fully loaded. So we need to use async await so that it will wait until this file has been successfully loaded before going to the next lifecycle method. Let's go back and reload the page. And yes, we get the console log without any errors. Now we can initialize intel input and add this.phone.el, which is the element object properties. Let's go back and reload the page. And yes, it's working fine. However, the placeholder with the correct format is not showing because we did not add the util script as stated on the documentation. Let's just copy the second parameter, which is an object that we can pass other options as well. Let's go back and reload the page. Alright, the formats are showing. There are other options that you may try, just like allow dropdown. Let's make it false. Reload the page. It's working fine. You may try it and test other options if you want. Let's try to add validation if the number entered is incorrect format. Let's add a new button, validate, and add an onClick event, validate. Let's create this method under component. Now the challenge here is how we can call intel input. We initialized it but only under onMounted lifecycle method. To fix that, we need to add a new class field, this.iti, and use it under onMounted method and assign intel input object. Now we can access this field to any method like on this method. Let's try to console log this.iti, go back to the browser and reload the page. Click validate. Okay, it's working fine. Now we can call isValidNumber to check if the phone number is indeed valid or not. Let's add an if statement, this.iti is valid number. If yes, just add a console log, phone is valid. And if not, console log, phone is not valid. Let's go back and try United States. Enter the same format as shown. Click validate, it's valid. If we try to add additional number and validate, okay, it's not valid. Based on this, you can show to the user that the number is invalid and block saving the data, or just simply add an alert message if the number is invalid. Go back to the component. We need to import useState from all and create a new state, which is phone valid, as undefined because we don't want to show immediately to the user if the phone number is valid or not. Then under validate method, if it's a valid number, let's update this that state found valid is equal to true. Otherwise, this that state that found valid is equal to false. Now on the template, let's use this state to show an alert message if valid or not. Let's add a new div with class alert, alert danger, which will show only if the state found valid is equal to false. And inside this div, add text phone is not valid. Copy this code and instead of found valid is equal to false, make it true, and alert from danger to success, and the text to phone is valid. Let's go back and reload the page. Right now, the state found valid is undefined, that's why there's no alert showing. But when we try to add invalid number and click validate, the alert will show, as well as if we add a valid number. If you want to get all the number with area codes, you can call two methods, like getNumber and getSelectedCountryData. Let's try to console log. And yes, you can now use it to update the state and save to the database. Lastly, let's try to download the file and add it directly to our module. Let's go back and click the latest release link and download the one in zip format. Once downloaded, let's extract the content, and inside this folder, let's copy the build folder. But before that, let's go back to our project and create a lib folder inside source folder. Then create another folder, Intel input, and paste the build folder. Now under onWillStart lifecycle method, let's replace the link to the name of our module, which is all, then static src lib Intel input. Let's go back to Odoo and reload the page. And yes, it's working fine. So it's up to you guys what method you will use to load these files. Now let's do the second task, which is to use Filepond Javascript library to Odoo using all. Let's open the documentation and click Filepond product page to check how Filepond works. So this is how it looks like if a file has been added, but let's first delete it. So we can either use drag and drop functionality or using browse to open the files you want to upload. Once uploaded, it will ask you to upload it or delete it and select another file. This example is the basic one, but if we click learn more and scroll, there's more functionality that you can use. Let's try to upload an image, and as you can see, it will have an image preview and edit functionality. This is pretty much the same we use in our smartphones, which is a nice feature. Notice also that it automatically saves the file, but you can also disable it. Alright, let's go back to the documentation and click installation. There are several methods that you can use, but for Odoo, let's select JavaScript. There is also different options how you can download it by using npm, loading from CDN, or manually downloading the file and include to our module. Let's do it by CDN, or you can also download it if you want. Either way will work as we have done on the first task. Let's go back to our project and duplicate this code and copy the JS and CSS files of Filepond. To check if it's working fine under onMounted lifecycle method, let's console log Filepond because this is the name of the class. Okay, we got the console log without any errors. And here are the properties of Filepond class. We are going to use two of these methods, which is create and register plugin. Let's go back to the documentation and check how to implement Filepond. So at this part, we already did it. Next is to create the HTML element with type file and then use this input to create Filepond instance. Let's open the template and copy this code. Let's change the title to Filepond, label to upload files, and input type as file, as well as the tref. Under the component, let's add a new ref. This.file is equal to useRefFile, which is the one we added on the template. Then under onMounted lifecycle method, let's use this ref to create Filepond instance using the create method. Let's go back to Odoo and reload the page. Okay, it's working fine. Let's try to upload the file. And yes, there's no error. But now, we can only add one file. If you want to add multiple files, we need to add an option, Allow Multiple. To check all other options that you can use, click the instance link and properties. There are a lot of properties that you can use here, but in our case, we want to use Allow Multiple. The default value is set to false, that's why we can't add multiple files. Let's copy this property and under create method, add another parameter which is an object and paste allow multiple with values as true. Let's go back and reload the page. Click browse and select multiple files. Alright, it's working fine. But notice that there's no button for uploading the file. That's because we don't instruct Filepond where to save the file. If we go to the server configuration, only if server property has been configured, Filepond will asynchronously upload the file. There are several options here, but we are only going to use process, which is the method of uploading the files to the server, and revert to delete the files to the server. If you want to fully use all the functionalities in Odoo, you can check the documentation with the help of this initial tutorial I will share to you. Let's check the process method, and it provides all the steps on how it works. But these steps are more applicable to PHP program, but in Odoo, it's different since it's saving file using the IR attachment model and all files will be stored as base64. If we open the attachment model, as you can see, these are the files saved by any models, which includes the website module in uploading files for blog post, for example. Let's go back to Filepond and check the code. So we can use these methods using set options. Let's first do saving files to the server only. Copy this code and paste. Or you can just simply add it to the existing Filepond instance. Let's go back to Odoo and reload the page. Upload any files. And of course, it will have an error since the API link we added doesn't exist yet. As you can see, we got 4 of our server response on the console log. To solve that, let's create a new controller and name it allExternalLibraries.py. Let's copy existing code from simple mail service and just rename the class to allExternalLibraries. The route filepond/process. Since this is an HTTP request, so we need to change the type to HTTP. Filepond send request as post type, so we need to add methods and add post. Let's make CSRF to false. Then let's name the method to Filepond process and remove the parameter since the files will be accessed under HTTP request object. Based on the documentation from Filepond, it expects a response which is unique ID as a string. But for now, we can just manually return any string without actually saving the data. Don't forget to add it in the init file and restart Odoo in order for our controller to work. Under components, let's then add a new route which is filepond/process. Let's go back and reload the page and try to upload. Okay, it's working fine. Let's try to add an integer. Restart Odoo and try to upload. Okay, doesn't accept integer. Let's try to add boolean value, restart Odoo, and try again. Alright, now we know how to return if either success or fail. Let's now see what Filepond is sending by printing the parameter from HTTP request. Restart Odoo, go back and try to upload. Checking the logs, we can see that we got Filepond and its value as file storage object. This is how Odoo Web Server handles requests of incoming files. It will be stored in file storage class, which we can get some properties like the file name and content type. Let's create a new variable, filepond, and pass a value by getting filepond under request.params object. Let's try to print the file name and content type. Restart Odoo. Go back and try to upload the file. Check the log, and yes, we got the file name and content type. Now let's see what are the needed fields by the attachment model. Let's create new attachment and upload any file. Notice that the name will be automatically added based on the file name. Let's save, and yes, it worked. If we inspect file content, its field name is datas with binary field type. In that case, we need to format the file as base64 before creating the attachment. Let's go back to the controller and import b64 encode from base64. Then create a new variable file and use b64 encode method and pass filepond object and call read method. Now that the file has been converted as base64, let's create a new variable ir attachment is equal to http.request.env and add the name of the model ir.attachment. Then call the create method and pass an object containing two mandatory fields, which are the name as filepond.filename and datas as the file. To make sure there's no error, let's store the create method into a variable attachment and print this variable. Let's restart Odoo and try to upload. Okay, there's no error. Let's check the log, and yes, it's returning a new ID. To verify, let's check the attachment model, and yes, the file was successfully added with the same ID on the log file. We can now use this to return false if there's an error in create method. Otherwise, return attachment ID as string. So we're done in uploading the files. Now let's do the revert method. Let's copy the same code and change the route to revert, same with the method. And since filepond send request as delete method, we need to change post to delete. Then let's comment all of this and just return an empty string for now. Go back to the component and under revert, let's pass the route we just created, which is filepond/revert. Let's restart Odoo, go back and reload the page, try to upload, and delete. Okay, we got no error. And under network tab, the response is fine. If we check the payload, notice that it's giving us the ID of the file. Now going back to the controller, we need to change the params since this will only works for form data, but for JSON objects, we need to use http request.data. Before we try, let's first import JSON so that we will format the response as a dictionary by calling json.loads. Let's restart Odoo, go back and upload file, then delete. Let's check the logs, and yes, we are now getting the ID. Let's add this data to a new variable ID. Let's bring back the code below. But instead of create, use search to select the record by passing a domain ID is equal to ID. If there's record found, let's just simply call unlink method to delete the record and just return an empty string. Let's restart Odoo, go back and upload another file. Before we try to delete, let's make sure it has been added in the attachment, having the same ID in the logs. Okay, it's there. Now if we click delete, we got no error, and to verify, let's open attachment and go back. Yes, it was successfully deleted. So lastly, let's try to add some plugins. Let's go back to Filepond documentation and click plugins. There are several plugins here that you can use. Let's try image preview. The same thing, we need to copy the CSS link and other component. Use load CSS method. Go back and copy the JS link and use load.js. Let's copy this code to register the plugin. It should be before Filepond initialization. Let's go back to Odoo and reload the page. Let's upload files. And there you go. We have a nice upload with image preview. You can try other plugins if you want. I will leave that to you guys. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something. Please hit like and subscribe for more tutorials. Thank you and God bless everyone.